Hey everyone, I have been a very lazy mountain bike owner. I've got a 2-year-old Trek which has the Fox Performance 34 fork, and it has never, ever been serviced. So it works fine, I think. So I'm hoping that once we do the lower leg service, change the seals and the dust wipers and change all the fluid, that it's gonna be amazing. So stick around and let's go ahead and do this. So here's the bike and there's the fork. Like I said, everything seems to be running fine right now, but I'm pretty sure it could stand a little TLC. So here's the stuff I'm gonna need, and I will include a list in the description of all of the tools, parts, and fluids that I needed. So just check the description and it'll all be there. And here's the fork. Got it all wiped down and cleaned up. And the first thing I gotta do is I'm gonna go ahead and let the air out of the air chamber so that I can go ahead and disassemble it. And just so you know, I did note the air pressure that was in here before. It's probably going to change, because I'm going to add some volume spacers. And I've taken notice of the rebound setting I have right now. All right, the next thing I got to do is I have to take off this rebound knob. And it is a 2mm hex. All right, so here you can see I've got the rebound knob off, and there's a 15mm and a 10mm socket that needs to be on there. So I'm gonna loosen these a little bit, and they're not on crazy tight. So back those off, a couple threads. So I've backed them off about maybe a 1/4 inch, and what I'll do is I'll go ahead and take a dead blow hammer and I'll just smack these enough to release the damper and the air shaft from the housing. And be careful, you've got the nut and a small crush washer which is in here, and you have a brand new one in the seal kit. There's the one crush washer and the second one. Now before I remove this, I'm going to go ahead and get a drain pan, tilt this down so I can drain the oil out and hopefully not make as much of a mess as I can. Now that that's drained out, go ahead and pull these off. Now I don't need to do this for the service, but I'm going to go ahead and remove this top cap, which has the spacers on it, because I want to be able to get in and clean the entire inside of this. And it's also going to make removing the air shaft easier because there's probably a vacuum of air up top. So rather than buying a very expensive specialty part from Park Tool, I bought this from the hardware store, and I just sanded the top of this so that the chamfer's gone. And that way it fits on the top of that a lot better. So I'm just going to go ahead and very carefully push down while I'm holding this, and it should release pretty easily. And once that's loosened, the rest of it should just unscrew pretty easily. And there it is with my 3 spacers. I'm not sure if you can see this, but there is a boatload of grease inside here, and I'm pretty sure that's more than it needs to be. So we're gonna go ahead and take this thing apart and completely clean it and reapply an appropriate amount of slick oleum so this thing will actually operate better. Now, in order to get this air shaft out, I need to remove, there is a spring clip that sits into a groove right here, and there's a little bit where it kind of sticks out right here. What I've got to do is I'm going to take a small screwdriver, stick it into here, and you see how it kind of moves? So what I'm going to do is just get behind there, pull it out and remove that, and then I can remove this air shaft. And there it is. And here's one more ring on the back side of that. And there it is. There's a little bit of vacuum, it sounds like, in the negative air chamber, so this is exciting. All right, yep. That is a lot of grease. Get all this wiped off. Now I'm gonna go back over this with some isopropyl alcohol and completely clean it all off. And I'll apply a little bit of that slick oleum to all these parts that move and have seals on them. But right now, that is not too bad. I'm just using a wooden dowel. I don't want to push any metal through this. And then just run that through a couple times. Then I'll get a clean rag and do the same thing. I know I should be wearing gloves, but I would rather wash my hands a couple times than deal with gloves. It's already looking pretty darn clean. Going on the top cap here. Clean the threads. That's what I'm talking about. Grease in all these holes, which I'm pretty sure is not a great thing. Now's a good time to check. Looks like the all the seals are pretty good. Go ahead and clean any of the grease off of these. Clean the threads up. I'll include a link in the description of the Ride Fox pages, which has information on the installed and maximum recommended spacers for each of the Fox forks, as well as some initial basic settings for sag, air pressure, rebound, and there's also a service manual link that I'll include, which will have all of the recommended amounts of the fluids based on the travel and stanchion diameter of your forks. So that'll be in the description. All right, now it's time to turn our attention to the lowers and the seal kit that we have, and let's see what's inside. We've got the two new seals, the dust wipers, new O-ring. Mine's still good, so I'll probably swap it out and save it. And they give you two of the small crush washers and one for the damper side crush washer. So these are going to be put in during the assembly. These we'll get to in a second. For right now, I'm going to go ahead and start soaking these in the 20 weight gold fluid so they get nice and completely saturated. And what I'll do is keep them in this little handy bag. A little bit of fluid in there. Make sure that they get completely soaked. Like I said, we'll just kind of let this all get soaked in and marinate while I clean the lowers and change out the seals on the top. So you can kind of see there's only so much they can really hold, but I want to make sure that they've got plenty of it in there. So it'll be nice and slippery once we're back out on the trail. So, all right, so before I go and clean these, I'm going to go ahead and remove these seals. And I don't really have to worry about damaging them because pulling them out is going to damage it. But here's the new ones. And they just kind of sit in here. I guess the first thing I can do is pull out the dust wipers. So any kind of a pick would be good. So just grab it. There's one. Just kind of reach behind it, pull it out, and you can kind of just grab it with your finger. So these don't actually look too bad. I don't see any debris, but they're dark, so that tells me that they're doing their job. They're picking up the dust and the dirt that gets pulled in, and hopefully keeping them here and keeping them off the stanchions. So to pull these out, I've got this tack puller, which seems like it should be able to do all right. So I'm just going to go underneath, hook it, and then all right, there's one. Not easy to get out. And a second one. All right, time for a little cleaning. And I'm looking in, and there is a lot of, damper side's pretty good, but the air side has got a lot of gunk. I think it's some of that excessive oil. So I'm gonna give it a quick wipe down on the outside and really start to work the inside. Clean that out. All right, that looks pretty clean. Give it one final spray and wipe down with clean rag. That's what I'm talking about. All right, so I'm not sure you can really see, but that is pretty clean. Hardest part is way at the bottom, you can't push something straight through, so you end up having to do a lot of dabbing and wiping and spraying and trying to twist the rag to pick up as much of the debris as you can inside the lowers. Now it's time to go ahead and install the seals. So here's the new seals, and it's going to be a very, very snug fit. So what I want to do first is I'm going to apply just a little bit of the 20 weight gold oil to the outside of the seal and just inside this portion of the fork, the lip, so hopefully it'll go in just a little bit easier. All right, now it's time to drive the seals in, and I think it would be almost impossible to install these without damaging them without the proper tools. So I'll include a link in the description of this. They come specifically for the diameter of the stanchions on your forks. This is a 34 millimeter, so it fits perfectly. And when you drive it in until it's just flush with the top of the housing. And that'll allow enough room for the dust wiper. So just kind of line it up and start to tap it in. Seems like that's about it. And you see how the top of this is flush with the top of the housing, and there's room inside here for the dust wiper. So I'll just repeat that with the other one. Looks pretty good. Now, time to install those dust wipers. If you're having a really hard time getting these in, you may have driven the seal too far in, and then you'll never be able to get that dust wiper in. All right, there it is. All right, so we've got the uppers all cleaned and ready to go. We got the lowers cleaned out with the seals replaced and the dust wipers replaced. The last thing we need to do at this point before we reassemble is deal with the air spring. Now, if you remember when I pulled this out, there was a lot of grease piled up on the top of this air spring. And there's little holes here with some vent holes underneath, which allows the air to equalize between the positive side of the air chamber and the negative side. And I believe there was air trapped on this side because I had to use about 15 PSI more than is recommended on the setup guide in order to get the sag that I needed. So, and I think that's because I had air on this side pushing against the positive side, and I didn't know any better. So I think that once we get this reinstalled properly so that there's no air trapped on the negative side, that it should be a lot more responsive and it should feel a ton better than what it did before. So let's go and get this thing greased up, and we'll go ahead and reinstall it and finish up the project. So what I'm going to use is this slick oleum. I know that other people will use slick honey, but basically it's a super lightweight grease that will just kind of help this this whole thing to kind of work better. So I'm going to apply just a little bit to the gasket, the seal on this. Not a whole terrible amount, but enough that it's gonna do something. I want to make sure I don't put so much on that it blocks those holes again. I'm gonna go ahead and apply some also to this O-ring on the bottom so it'll seal and still operate within the inside of the stanchion. And then I'm gonna go ahead and put a little bit on the air shaft itself, just so that the parts that need to be able to move on it, oh, it's tons better, can still move freely. I'm also going to apply just a little bit on the inside of the air side where that seal is going to be, and just a tiny bit in that groove where that lock ring is going to be. Now, you don't have to take out the top cap to do any of this, but I wanted to make sure I added these spacers anyway, and by having this out, it makes reinserting all the parts a little easier because I know that there's not going to be air trapped behind this. So make sure you install this with the piston all the way up. Don't install it like this, otherwise you might have the same issue I had with air being trapped. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of gently work this in. Until it reaches the end. I've got this small flat washer which goes in first. And then this snap ring, which we removed with the little screwdriver, so let's kind of clean that off and kind of work that back in. I just want to make sure that that's fully seated in the ring. I believe it is. So just to make sure, I'm going to grab this and pull, and it seems like it's fully in. All right, one more wipe down of the stanchions. And now I can reinstall the lowers. Right now, before I install the lowers, I'm going to apply a little bit of the slick oleum to just the inside. There's a little cavity in the seal. We'll just put a little bit in there just to kind of help everything to slide on a little easier. Now it's time to put the lowers, insert them back on. I'm going to be very careful to try to get this lined up. Work one side on and the other. There we go. And once they're both on, just kind of work it until everything kind of comes through. And here you can see all the threadings come through. So before I get this all buttoned up, I'm going to go ahead and bring this back just a little bit so I can go ahead and insert the fluid into the air chamber and the damper chamber. I'll leave a link in the description, but this is I made a copy from the website, and what it shows is the amount of fluid that you need to put in depending on the stanchion size of your fork, the travel, and depending on whether you have the Fit 4 or the grip damper. The grip dampers all use this PTFE infused 5-weight fluid, and the Fit 4 uses both the 20-weight gold on both sides, and my fork uses 10 cc's of the 20-weight gold on the air chamber and 40 cc's of the PTFE 5-weight in the damper side. So in order to get an accurate amount, I've got me a little handy dandy plunger, and we'll do the air side first. So we'll measure out 10 cc's. Now it's time to go ahead and reinstall the fresh crush washers and get it all buttoned back up. And you'll notice there's a little shoulder that crush washer sits into. So I'm going to install just a little bit of that slick oleum to the backside of this nut just to hold that in place while it goes on so it doesn't get crooked. And I'll do the same thing with the crush washer for the air side. All right, the last thing, it does call for 3 cc's in the air chamber, so that's just a very, very tiny amount. Then it's time to reinstall my top cap with my new additional spacers on. Be very careful to not cross thread this. If you can't hand tighten this all the way down, it's probably not right. Now, all I got to do is I've got to reinstall my rebound cap, and I'm going to reinflate. I'm going to add a couple PSI, cycle it a few times, and I'll keep bringing it up to what they recommend. And then I'll check it on the bike and we'll see how the sag looks. Well, it is all put back together, and I've got it all aired up for basically 20% sag, which is, they recommend 15 to 20. Right now I'm about 8 or 9 PSI over what they have in their charts, but maybe a little heavier. But I can tell right now that it's really nice and supple off the top. Definitely a lot less stiction than before. And the resistance, I can already feel that really, I may end up taking 1 or 2 of those out because 6 is the most it can hold. That is super progressive, but yeah, it's going to be interesting. Well, that was a pretty good project. I wish I would have not put it off as long as I did. Is there any project that you are putting off right now? Let me know in the comments section. If you like this, please give me a thumbs up. If you have any questions about anything I did or if I messed up on something, please let me know. And if you're like me and refuse to act your age, please subscribe. Thanks for watching.